Hey everyone, we have a great topic today. Today, we're going to talk all about lifting heavy. I'm sure you've heard that term before, and you've probably wondered, well, just how heavy is enough? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about lifting heavy, and we're going to talk about all the factors that might affect just how heavy you actually lift. All right, before we begin to specifically talk about lifting heavy, let's talk a little bit about some information that may help us understand why we're so interested in lifting heavy. First, women begin to lose muscle mass around the age of 30. However, around the age of 60, that rate of loss actually increases. Well, muscle mass can get to the point, at least the loss of muscle mass can get to the point where you might develop sarcopenia. And sarcopenia is when you lose strength and it affects your daily activities like walking or walking up the stairs or maybe getting out of a chair. So it's important, if there is something that you can do about this loss of muscle mass, you definitely want to do it. That's where strength training comes in. Now, before we talk about lifting heavy, let's talk about one other situation that occurs in women in midlife, and that's called osteopenia. Osteopenia is a loss in bone density. Yes, during midlife, our bone density decreases and it could lead to osteopenia. If osteopenia continues, or if that bone loss continues, then ultimately it could lead to osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is when your bones are so weak and that bone mineral density is so low that you're at a high risk of bone breakage. However, here's what we know. Being active and strength training can help offset the situations of both muscle loss and a decrease in bone density. So now let's look at lifting heavy. All over social media these days, you can see coaches and trainers encouraging you to lift heavy. Well, I'm going to share with you 6 different factors that you can use in order to determine just how heavy you should lift. So let's get started. Number 1, your experience with strength training. I know this may seem obvious, but I want to make sure that when you start strength training, you take your experience into consideration. Someone who's just starting out strength training will obviously not lift as heavy as someone who has been strength training for longer than they have been. And so it's important to know that your experience, and if you're a beginner, then you need to start at the beginning. This means learning correct form before you increase that weight. With some exercises, you can even do them with your own body weight in order to become more efficient at getting that exercise done before you actually add some additional weight. Now, if you're an experienced lifter and you've been strength training for a while, you will obviously be lifting more than the person who has just started, which takes us to number 2, your actual strength. We are individuals, and as individuals, some of us may be stronger than others, and that's okay. Your actual strength matters, and that's also going to be a factor into how heavy you lift. It was interesting. I remember one of my group members once, we were moving from resistance bands to dumbbells. And so she went to the gym and I told them they needed to make sure they had access to 10-pound dumbbells, 15-pound dumbbells, and 20-pound dumbbells. So she reported back to us that she just went to go lift up the dumbbells and she said, whew, that 20-pound dumbbell almost took me out. Well, that's because she was not used to lifting a 20-pound dumbbell. Now, of course, she uses a 20-pound dumbbell regularly. However, before she started, it was really heavy to her. Now she's used to it and she can use that 20-pound dumbbell, whereas before she couldn't. So your actual strength matters in how heavy you lift. All right, ladies, for number 3, let's talk about contraindications. These are things that are going to impact not just how heavy you lift, but possibly even the actual exercises that you do. I'm talking about things like arthritis, or things like joint pain, or things like back issues, or perhaps you had joints replacements. Those types of things will actually impact how heavy you lift as well as the exercises you do. All right, the next factor that's going to affect how heavy you lift is the equipment that you have available to you. So if you have things such as resistance bands, well, resistance bands are going to be different from, let's say, dumbbells. And dumbbells are going to be different from machines and machines from barbells. So it just all depends on the actual equipment. However, within the different pieces of equipment, you can lift heavy within them. So for example, if you're focused on working with resistance bands come in different resistances. So typically, the thinner the resistance band, the lighter the load. The thicker the resistance band or the heavier the resistance band, the heavier the load. So if you're just using resistance bands for strength training, you need to determine which of those resistance bands is going to give you the most challenge. And that challenge should determine just how heavy you work or how heavy you lift using those resistance bands. It's the same thing if you have dumbbells. If you're using dumbbells and let's say you have 3 sets of dumbbells, let's say you have a pair of 15s, a pair of 20s, and a pair of 25s. Again, if that's the equipment that you have, then you're going to be limited based on that equipment. So you might want to use your 25-pound dumbbells when you work on your lower body because your lower body tends to be stronger than your upper body, and you might end up using your 15-pound dumbbells for your upper body. But the equipment will determine just how heavy you lift. The 5th factor is going to sound similar to the one we just talked about, the equipment, but I am putting it in a category by itself, and that is whether or not you have access to a gym, even if you're considering your home gym, because access to a gym will provide more opportunity for you to lift heavier, basically because you do have more equipment. All right. The final factor that you're going to consider is your specific goal. So for example, some people have performance goals. They may want to deadlift their body weight or heavier. They might want to bench press more than they've ever bench pressed before. They have specific performance goals. They may want to do pull-ups or push-ups. When you have performance goals, you're going to train in order for you to reach those performance goals. This means that some of your training might be targeted towards those goals and you lift heavier for those certain goals. Or another goal could be that you have an aesthetic goal, right? You want to look a certain way. So you may say, well, I want to look toned, or I want people to see my muscles. When you have a goal like this, you want to make sure that you are strength training regularly. You want to make sure that you're strength training about 3 to 4 times a week. You want to make sure that when you are strength training, you feel like you've been working. That means that you feel like you've been challenged. You want to make sure that when you are strength training, your last 2 or 3 reps in each set is going to be challenging for you. You know that you're working because your rate that you're lifting is slowing down. You know that you're challenging yourself because the weight feels heavier on those last 2 or 3 reps than it did when you first started. So those are some of the things that you need to think about. In fact, those are some of the things that you want to think about, whether you are considering your performance goal, whether you're considering an aesthetic goal, or if you just want to be healthy and active and make sure that you are training so that you can resist muscle loss as you age and you can resist loss of bone density as you age. All of those are factors you should think about in order to lift your heavy. Lifting heavy is very individual, and whether you use resistance bands or dumbbells or machines at the gym, the idea is to always challenge yourself. The idea is to lift your heavy and to do it regularly. In fact, if you're ready to start and you're not quite sure how to get started, I have a video that I'm going to link here that shows you how you can get started with your strength training. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop the questions in the comment section. Also, if you liked the content of this video, please like this video and make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel.